There is a boy frozen in ice at the bottom of the world. He has been there for 100 years. His eyes are closed. His hands are folded gently around the idea of a small lemur that does not yet exist in this part of the story. Not in this first quiet moment before everything begins. The ice surrounding him is not gray or white or the pale blue of ordinary glacial water. It is the deep, vivid, impossible blue of something that is still alive inside it. A color that does not belong to any natural phenomenon in that part of the world. A color that means the thing inside is still burning, still going, still holding, still present in a way that ordinary things do not manage to be after 100 winters have passed over them. In a small village at the edge of the frozen south, a girl with blue eyes and a water tribe braid is climbing into a boat. Her brother is beside her. They paddle out across gray water, not knowing what they are about to find. Not knowing that what they are about to find will set in motion the end of a century-long war, the death of a tyrant, and the saving of a world that had almost stopped believing it could be saved. That is how Avatar, The Last Airbender begins. Not with trumpets. Not with a declaration of epic purpose. With a girl in a boat and something glowing beneath the ice. And in the years since that first episode aired on the 21st of February 2005, the people who love this show have never quite stopped asking questions about it. Not because the show is confusing, not because it leaves holes that frustrate you, but because it is rich enough, careful enough, and honest enough with its own world that every answer it gives you opens the door to 3 more questions. The world of Avatar breathes. It has weight, it has history, it has shadows that fall in directions the camera does not always point. This video is about those shadows. We are going to move through the great unanswered questions of the Avatar world tonight, one by one, with care and with patience. Some of the theories we will discuss have been quietly confirmed by the show's creators in interviews, in the comics, or in the events of The Legend of Korra. Others remain exactly what they are, the best thinking of people who love this world enough to sit with it carefully. Where something is confirmed, you will know it. Where something is speculation, you will know that too. The line between those two things matters, and we are not going to pretend they are the same. So settle in, pull the blanket a little higher, let the light go soft around you. Let the sounds of wherever you are fade down to almost nothing. Because tonight we are going into the deep places of the Avatar world, and we are going to stay there for a long while. Everything you need to be comfortable, you already have. Everything else can wait until morning. Let us begin. Section 1. The Frozen Boy and the 100 Years He Slept Through. Let us begin with Aang. Not with who he becomes across 3 seasons. Not with the Avatar state, or the final fight above a burning forest, or the moment he takes something fundamental away from the man who built his life around it. Let us begin with who he was at the exact moment the ice sealed around him, because that moment is the foundation of almost everything the show is about. 12 years old, a monk. The son of no one in particular, raised communally in the tradition of the air nomads, belonging to the whole community, and therefore belonging completely to the practice and the philosophy and the warm, difficult discipline of people who had decided, centuries before his birth, that gentleness was the highest form of strength. He had been at the Southern Air Temple his entire life. He knew its towers and its halls and its cold, windy outer corridors, the way children know the places they grow up in intimately and without ever quite thinking about them. He had Monk Gyatso. He had Appa, the sky bison assigned to him at birth, his animal companion and his spiritual counterpart and his best friend in the complete, uncomplicated way that children form best friendships before the world teaches them to be careful about it. He had the other young monks, the other children of the air nomad tradition. He had a life that, while unusual in its spiritual intensity and its demands, was still a life. He was happy in the way people are happy when they are in the right place, and they know it without examining it too closely. And then he was told that the right place was about to be taken from him. The monk elders had been watching Aang for years. They knew he was the Avatar. They had suspected it before it was officially confirmed, because certain things about him pointed unmistakably toward the ancient role he had been born into. The ease with which the air moved around him, the depth of his connection with Appa, the unusual speed with which he had advanced through airbending forms that took other students years longer to master. When the revelation was made formally, somewhat earlier than tradition usually called for, it was because the elders were afraid. Specifically, they were afraid of what the Fire Nation was becoming under Fire Lord Sozin, and they believed the world was going to need an avatar sooner rather than later. Their fear was correct. Their timing, as it turned out, was almost exactly right and simultaneously almost entirely too late. In the meantime, they had a decision to make about Aang's training. The decision they made was to separate him from monk Gyatso. Gyatso was his greatest teacher, and also, in the Elder's view, his most significant obstacle. Gyatso loved Aang with the kind of genuine and uncomplicated affection that teachers are not supposed to feel for students, because that kind of love makes it impossible to push someone to their actual limit. You cannot put a person you love in genuine danger in order to teach them what danger teaches. You cannot be the one who takes a child's happiness away in service of their destiny. Gyatso made Aang happy, and a happy 12-year-old, the elders believed, was not a 12-year-old who was ready to carry the weight of the world. They planned to send him to the Eastern Air Temple, away from Gyatso, away from everything familiar, into a harder, more demanding training environment where his formation as the Avatar could proceed without the softening influence of a man who, in the elders' honest assessment, loved him too much to do what needed to be done. Aang found out. The show does not tell us exactly how. The implication is that he overheard something he was not meant to hear, or received a piece of the truth through the particular channel that bad news always finds, the one that arrives before the official conversation. What we know is the result. A 12-year-old boy who felt, in the space of a single afternoon, that the one certainty he trusted completely had dissolved. Not his home, not his practice, his safety. His certainty that the people responsible for him wanted him to be whole, and not just useful. He ran. He took Appa and he flew south, away from the temple, away from the island, out over the open ocean where the cold was a physical pressure against the chest, where the sky went from the pale gray of mountain afternoon to the deep iron gray of open ocean storm. The storm caught them. He was 12. Appa was enormous and frightened. The water came up fast and dark and complete, and then something happened that was not panic and was not resignation. The Avatar state activated. His eyes went white. A ring of blue light expanded from his body in the moment before the ice closed over him. And then the ice sealed, and the blue light continued burning, and it burned for 100 years without once going out. Here is the first theory, one that lives in the space between confirmed fact and deeply earned speculation. The Avatar state is not simply a power amplifier. It is not just what happens when Aang becomes furious or afraid or pushed past the point of ordinary human capacity. At its core, the Avatar state is the accumulated spiritual energy of every Avatar who has ever lived, pressing through the body of the current Avatar in moments when that accumulated weight is needed. Which means that when Aang went into the ice, he was not alone in there. Every Avatar before him, from Wan the very first to Roku who came just before him, became part of the energy that sealed that sphere and maintained it across a century. They held him, not necessarily with deliberation, not through anything as orderly as a collective decision in some spiritual waiting room, but in the way that deep spiritual forces maintain the things they are invested in, continuously, without fatigue, without fail, because failing is not available to them as an option when what they are maintaining is the continuation of their own lineage. The reason this matters is the alternative. If Aang had died in that storm, the Avatar cycle would have continued. A new Avatar would eventually have been born. But here is the timing. The next Avatar after an air nomad would be born into the Water Tribe. They would be born, at best, 12 to 15 years after Aang's death. By that point, the air nomad genocide would have already occurred. The Southern Water Tribe would already have been systematically targeted by Fire Nation raids. The Earth Kingdom would already be losing ground that it would never fully recover, and the Fire Nation's century of compounding advantage would have made the odds deeply unfavorable for any Avatar trying to reverse it. A child Avatar born into that world, without air nomad teachers, without the full rotation of training the role requires, would face a situation even more impossible than the one Aang faces when he wakes up. The past lives looked at the situation and made a calculation. They chose the Avatar who already existed, the one who was trained in his native element, who had the foundation, who had the specific kind of compassion and courage that the particular problem facing the world was going to require. They held him in the ice until the world was in the exact configuration necessary for his return to mean something, not just survivable, but sufficient. There is a quiet tragedy underneath the miracle of this preservation that the show earned slowly and in pieces. They kept him alive, but they could not tell him how long he would sleep, could not prepare him for the weight of waking up into a world where everyone he had ever known was 100 years dead, where his entire people had been destroyed in a single night, where the culture and the language and the particular way of moving through the world that had formed him was gone from the planet except where it lived in him alone. He woke up in a world that had been grieving his absence for a century, and he did not know what that meant yet, so he could not grieve back. He just smiled at Katara and asked where they were and started playing with Sokka on a hill, because he was 12 and he had been asleep for 100 years, and his heart had not yet had time to understand what the sky above the empty temple was telling him. The theory about the iceberg's resting place connects the preserved by past lives reading to a larger pattern the show is quietly building. Aang left the southern air temple flying south, heading away from everything familiar. The storm caught them over the southern ocean. If the currents of the world were entirely random, there is no particular reason the iceberg should have come to rest specifically in the waters just off the southern water tribe. It could have drifted anywhere. Empty sea, a Fire Nation patrol route, the open ocean where no one would ever find it. Instead, it came to Katara, to the last waterbender in the Southern Ocean, the one person in that part of the world most desperate for something to believe in, most ready to dedicate herself entirely to the mission of helping the Avatar do what needed to be done. There is a version of this story in which the iceberg is found by someone who does not care, or who does not recognize what the blue glow means. In all of those versions, the story ends before it begins. It came to Katara. Whether you read that as the currents of something deeper than chance, or as the past lives steering the ice with whatever subtle influence they had over a century, the result is the same. The Avatar arrived where he was most needed. And the show invites you, gently and without insistence, to decide for yourself whether that was random. Now let us go back to the temple, to the room where the air nomads ended, to the man who was Aang's teacher and his father in every way that the word father actually means something beyond biology. Monk Gyatso died at the Southern Air Temple during the assault Sozin launched on the night his comet crossed the sky. The show gives us one brief, devastating shot of what remained. His robes, his skeleton, around him, also on the ground, the remains of Fire Nation soldiers, many of them, clustered in a way that does not come from being blasted through walls or knocked backward by gusts of wind. They fell where they stood. They fell close. And there are no burn marks. Not on Gyatso's robes, not on the floor, not on the walls. The soldiers during the attack were enhanced by Sozin's comet, their firebending amplified to a degree that should have left every surface of any room they fought in looking like the inside of a furnace. The walls should be black, the floor should be charred. There should be unmistakable physical evidence of an extended firebending engagement. There is none, which means there was no firebending. There was a room full of comet-enhanced firebenders who did not have time or space or breath to use their element. The theory, held now by enough of the Avatar fan community that it has essentially passed into accepted consensus, Gyatso removed the air from the room. Airbending, as the show depicts it throughout 3 seasons, is almost never used this way. The air nomad philosophy of non-violence and evasion means that practitioners use their element overwhelmingly to deflect, redirect, and escape. The style is defined by this philosophical choice. There are almost no examples in the show of airbending being deployed in an openly destructive way toward living people, not because the destructive potential does not exist, but because the tradition chooses not to use it. But removing air from a sealed space is not technically an attack, it is an absence. You do not need to push someone to hurt them with the withdrawal of the thing they need to breathe. You simply take the air away. And in a room sealed by stone walls, with a monk who had nowhere to go and nothing left to protect except his own final accounting with the people who had destroyed his world, removing the air from the space was the one action available that a comet-enhanced firebender could not counter. You cannot bend fire into existence from nothing. You need oxygen for combustion. Take the oxygen and you take the fire, and you take everything the soldiers were depending on. He gathered them around him, and he took the air, and he sat down quietly among the dying, and he did not get up again. The most peaceful of the air nomads, The man who was too soft for his students' own good, who let a 12-year-old boy play pie show instead of drilling forms, who believed that joy was not a distraction from spiritual development, but an expression of it. In the end, he used the most absolute and the most silent weapon his tradition contained, and he used it once, and he used it well. When Aang finds the room in the first season, the music the show has been running drops out completely. The ambient sound of cold wind outside the temple is what remains while Aang approaches his teacher's skeleton, reaches for the staff leaning against the wall nearby, and goes still. He processes the thing that does not have language yet, the understanding that arrives in the body before the mind can find words for it. He enters the avatar state in his grief. Involuntarily, uncontrollably, the past lives pressing through him, because the moment requires more than 12 years of lived experience can hold. And then Katara reaches him, and her voice brings him back. The production team built the silence in that moment deliberately. It is not the absence of care. It is the presence of something so complete and specific that music would only dilute it. Gyatso's death is given silence because silence is the only container large enough to hold it without spilling. Something worth sitting with before we continue. The monks who made the decision to separate Aang from Gyatso were not wrong. Not entirely. Gyatso did love the boy too much to be the person who pushed him to his limit. The elders' fear of Sozin's fire was real and justified, and arriving faster than anyone who was not Sozin himself understood. And the world did need the Avatar urgently, in ways that 12-year-old Aang was not yet ready to be. They were right about all of this. And in being right about all of this, they set in motion the exact sequence of events that led to the air nomad genocide catching their most powerful living weapon off-world, frozen in ice at the bottom of the ocean, unavailable for 100 years. The cruelty of that irony is the show's most careful structural tragedy. The people who were trying hardest to save the world made the specific decision that made saving the world as close to impossible as it ever came. There is no villain in Gyatso's room. There is no villain in the decision to separate Aang from his teacher. There is only the accumulated weight of people trying to do the right thing in a situation that was already too far gone for the right thing to be clearly visible. This is the note the show strikes in its very first season, in its very first major flashback. Not evil against good, the much harder thing. People trying and the terrible indifference of events that do not care how hard you were trying. Before we go any further into the world of Avatar tonight, I want to hear from you. Drop a comment right now and tell me where in the world you are and what time it is there. Whether you are lying in a warm bed somewhere in the middle of the night, or sitting on a couch with the lights low and the week finally behind you, tell me where you are. And if this is the kind of content that helps you slow down and breathe, subscribing takes 2 seconds and it means more of this finds its way to you. Now, back to the world. Section 2. Iroh, the Dragon of the West, and the Man Behind the Tea. There is a line Iroh says in The Legend of Korra, many years after the events of Avatar, The Last Airbender, when he appears in the spirit world as an elderly man who has chosen to remain there after his physical death. A young avatar named Korra finds him serving tea in a place that looks, with deliberate and loving intent, like his old tea shop from Ba Sing Se. She is upset. He is calm. He says something that sounds simple but carries the weight of an entire life's worth of becoming. He says he always enjoyed the company of spirits. So when his work in the material world was finished, he chose to leave his body behind and come here. He chose. Not died in the ordinary sense, not fated, not was taken. He chose, with full awareness of what choosing meant, to walk out of the physical world and into the spirit world the way you might walk from one room of a house into another, having decided you were done with the first room and the second one was where you wanted to be. The question this creates, and that Avatar fans have been sitting with for years, is not simply how he did it. It is when he became the kind of person who could. Because what Iroh is describing is a level of spiritual integration that the show across 3 seasons never quite makes fully explicit. It implies it. It builds toward it. But it leaves the diagram undrawn, and that open space is exactly where the most interesting thinking lies. We know that Iroh was a general in a very real and operational sense, not a symbolic figurehead. An active, feared, strategically gifted military commander who laid siege to Ba Sing Se for 600 days. 600 days is approximately 20 months. Nearly 2 years of sustained military pressure against the most fortified city in the world, a city that had resisted every previous attempt at conquest in the entire history of the Fire Nation's expansion. Ba Sing Se had 3 concentric rings of wall, an earthbending tradition of defense that had been refining itself for centuries, and the institutional knowledge of a city that had held against everyone who had ever tried to take it. Iroh breached the outer wall. He was the first commander in recorded history to do it, not through a lucky accident but through the sustained application of genuine military genius over 20 months of unbroken operational pressure. The city was about to fall. The inner wall was all that remained between his forces and the Earth King's palace. And then Lu Ten died. His son, a soldier on the front lines, killed in the fighting. The show never depicts this directly because the detail is not the point. The point is the result. Iroh walked away from a siege he was winning. Not a strategic withdrawal, not an order from above. He simply stopped. He returned home. He surrendered the title of Crown Prince that would have made him Fire Lord after Azulon's death. He stepped out of the succession line entirely. He sat with his grief and then undertook a mysterious, solitary journey. Admiral Zhao, who is not a spiritual person and who says this with the particular contempt of someone who cannot understand why spiritual things would matter to anyone, mentions during the Siege of the North that there is a rumor Iroh journeyed to the spirit world. The show puts this in Zhao's mouth for a reason. The show does not put things in Zhao's mouth carelessly. The theory assembled from the available pieces is this. After Lu Ten's death, Iroh went into the spirit world looking for his son. He was, at this point, a man whose emotional vocabulary had been built almost entirely by a lifetime of military service in a nation that understood fire as destruction and power. He knew how to hold a city under siege. He knew how to coordinate armies. What he did not know was how to hold grief. What he did not know was what he was for. Now that the project of his life had failed, and the person who would have inherited everything he built was dead, he went into the spirit world. Whether he found Lu Ten there, the show never confirms. What seems evident from who Iroh is when we meet him in the first episode is that he found something else, something that reorganized everything he thought he understood about the world and his place in it. The shape of the world as it actually was beneath the Fire Nation's version of it. The spirits that maintain the balance between the physical and spiritual dimensions, and the damage being done to that balance by a century of conquest. The understanding arrived at not through argument but through direct perception that the world is not 4 nations competing for dominance, but a single system whose health depends on an equilibrium. The Fire Nation's expansion had been degrading for 100 years. He came back different, not because he had found answers so much as because he had found the right questions, and the right questions had fundamentally reorganized what he was for. From that point forward, everything Iroh did, the tea, the wisdom, the apparent bumbling, the genuine warmth, the Pai Sho games, the White Lotus, the years of patient steering of his nephew toward the version of himself that could help heal what the Fire Nation had broken, was oriented by that reorganization. The chess master theory. The theory holds that from very early in the show, possibly from the very beginning, Iroh was not genuinely trying to help Zuko capture the Avatar. He was trying to help Zuko become the kind of person who would eventually, through his own developing moral character and his own freely made choices, understand why capturing the Avatar was exactly the wrong thing to do and choose to do the opposite. He could not tell Zuko this directly. A 16-year-old who has organized his entire identity around a goal is not reachable by arguments against that goal. He would dismiss them as evidence that his uncle did not believe in him, and he would push harder in the direction he was already going. So Iroh did not argue. He created small delays and distractions at precisely the moments when a direct confrontation between Zuko and Team Avatar would have ended the story very differently. He asked questions that landed differently than lectures would have. He made observations that Zuko could not quite use yet, but that settled into him in the places where future understanding would eventually germinate. He was doing the work of a gardener in the period before anything above ground is visible, preparing the soil, tending conditions, trusting a process that most people would not have the patience to trust. Consider the early episode when Aang is captured by Admiral Zhao. Zuko puts on the Blue Spirit mask and infiltrates Zhao's heavily fortified installation alone, carrying the unconscious Avatar out on his back through corridors full of soldiers. His stated justification is self-interest. By preventing Zhao from capturing Aang, he preserves his own opportunity. But the logistics of what he actually does cannot be fully explained by self-interest. The risk is disproportionate to any purely strategic calculation, and the specific choice to carry a helpless 12-year-old through hostile territory, to physically put himself between that child and the people trying to hurt him, is not exhausted by the category of self-interest. Iroh does not stop him. More significantly, when Zuko returns, Iroh is not surprised. He was waiting. He already understood what Zuko was going to do because he had been reading his nephew carefully for years, and he knew what Zuko had the capacity to permit himself, regardless of his stated goals. This is the deepest version of the chess master theory. Iroh was not managing Zuko toward a specific set of actions. He was managing the conditions under which Zuko's own nature could express itself. Every time Zuko made the right call for the wrong reasons, every time the goodness in him found expression despite his insistence that he was motivated only by honor and strategic self-interest, Iroh was there to witness it without commenting, to note it in the ongoing account he was keeping of who his nephew actually was, underneath the wound and the mission and the need for his father's approval. He was accumulating evidence of the real Zuko, patiently, over 2 seasons, until the real Zuko had enough evidence of itself to become the only version. Now, about the dragons. Ran and Shao, the last 2 living dragons in the Avatar world, hidden in the ruins of the Sun Warriors' ancient civilization. Iroh found them before the events of the show. He trained with them. He learned from them the thing that every Fire Nation bender since Sozin had been taught was not the truth. That fire is not rage, not destruction, not the expression of power's right to take what it wants. Fire is life. It is the warmth that keeps living things alive, the light that allows them to find each other in the dark, the energy at the center of all organic processes. The dragon does not give you its fire. It shows you where yours was always coming from. Iroh came back from the dragons and told the Fire Nation he had killed the last one. He accepted the title Dragon of the West. He wore a reputation built on a lie he had told to protect something he understood was more valuable than his reputation. He carried that false title for decades, knowing exactly what it was and what it cost him. Because the alternative was the extinction of the creatures who had taught him the most important thing he ever learned. And years later, when Aang and Zuko needed to find the source of firebending the way Iroh had found it, when Zuko's bending was failing because it was rooted in the wrong place in fear and desperation rather than in life and warmth, Iroh sent them to the Sun Warriors. He sent them to Ran and Shao. He gave them the thread to follow without explaining where it led, because the thing at the end of the thread was not something that could be carried in a description. It could only be found. When Iroh's work in the physical world was done, and the word done carries all of Zuko's coronation, and all of the White Lotus retaking Ba Sing Se, and all of the war finally ending in it, he walked into the spirit world. He did not announce it. He simply went, the way a person goes home at the end of a very long day, with the specific relief of someone who has been a great distance from where they belong, and is finally not anymore. He is there now, serving tea. And when someone who needs him finds their way to that particular corner of the spirit world, he is available with exactly the warmth and exactly the wisdom and exactly the patience of someone who has been waiting, without impatience, for as long as the waiting required. There is one more dimension of the Iroh theory worth sitting with, and it is the one about what his warmth actually is and where it came from. People sometimes read Iroh as having always been the gentle, philosophical man we meet in the show, as if he was born that way, as if the wisdom was natural and the warmth was default. The show carefully, quietly corrects this impression if you are paying attention. Iroh was a conqueror. He spent decades being feared. He laid siege to cities. He commanded armies that killed people. He operated, for most of his adult life, inside an ideology of Fire Nation supremacy that he genuinely held, genuinely believed, genuinely acted on. He was not a gentleman who stumbled into a military career. He was a general who became something else. The warmth is not who he was before the war. It is who he built himself into after the worst thing that could have happened to him happened, and he chose, in the aftermath, to become a different kind of person rather than a more damaged version of the kind he had been. This is the thing about Iroh that makes him genuinely extraordinary as a character and not just comfortably wise. He is not wise because he never did anything wrong. He is wise because he did many things wrong and looked at them honestly and kept working. The man who makes tea in the spirit world paid a very high price for the clarity he arrived at, and he paid it willingly, and he never stopped paying it. And the result of that sustained and costly process of becoming is the person who sits across from a lost young avatar in the spirit world and says the things she needs to hear in exactly the way she needs to hear it. His tea is not a symbol of passivity or withdrawal from the world. It is the opposite. Every cup of tea Iroh makes and offers to another person is an act of deliberate civilization in the middle of barbaric conditions. It is the choice, made again and again, to insist that the small human gesture of warmth and hospitality matters even when the world is burning, especially when the world is burning. Tea is the way Iroh says. This, right here, this cup between us, this moment of stillness, this is what we are fighting to preserve. Not territory, not succession, not the pride of any nation. This moment, this warmth, this person sitting across from me who deserves to be seen clearly and treated gently, that is what it was always about. Section 3. Zuko's two faces and the scar that was always telling the truth. Before we talk about what the camera does with Zuko's scar, let us spend a few minutes with the scar itself, because the show does not tell you how he got it immediately. It waits. It waits until you care about Zuko enough that the information lands with its full weight, because information about how someone was hurt by someone who should have protected them always lands harder when you have had time to love the person being described. He was 13 years old. His father, Fire Lord Ozai, called a war meeting, high-ranking military officers, Fire Nation generals and admirals. The kind of room where decisions are made that affect tens of thousands of lives and are not typically questioned by anyone in it. Zuko was present as a prince, as a member of the royal family, as someone raised from birth to believe that his presence in rooms like this was his inheritance and his purpose. A general proposed a plan that Zuko found morally unacceptable. The plan involved using a unit of new recruits, soldiers who had just completed training, as a diversion. They would be sent directly into combat against a defended earthbending position in a role that was functionally sacrificial. The tactical logic was that new recruits were worth less than seasoned soldiers, therefore their lives were appropriately spent in the way the plan described. Zuko spoke against it. In that room, in front of his father and every military commander of the Fire Nation, a 13-year-old prince said, clearly and without hedging, that this plan was wrong, that the lives of those young soldiers were worth more than the plan treated them as being worth. That honor required treating human beings as human beings rather than as expendable material. Ozai interpreted this as disrespect. He announced that Zuko would face the man he had insulted in an Agni Kai as a consequence. Zuko believed he was going to face the general whose plan he had criticized. When he turned around in the arena, he found his father. He could not fight his father. He would not fight his father. He knelt and he begged, not from cowardice, but from the absolute impossibility of raising his hand against the man around whom his entire sense of what he was for had been built. Ozai interpreted the refusal to fight as weakness, and weakness was the thing he had decided, long before this moment, that he would not tolerate in the child he had been assigned to shape into an heir. He pressed his hand to his son's face. He held it there. He left a mark that would cover half of Zuko's face for the rest of his life, and then he called it justice, and then he banished the boy he had just burned. This is the backstory the camera is carrying for 3 entire seasons. Every shot choice the storyboard artists make regarding Zuko's face is, in a quiet and consistent way, a reference back to this story. The technique is built into the show's visual grammar as follows. When Zuko is operating from the part of himself that his father's cruelty installed, when he is driven by shame or anger, or the hunger to prove something to a man who does not want to be proven anything to, the camera frames him from the scarred side. You see the mark. You see what it represents even before you know exactly how he got it. When Zuko is operating from something older and quieter, from the goodness that was there before his father got to it, the camera tends to show you the other side, the side that looks like a boy, the side that looks like the person he was going to be before someone decided he needed to be marked. This runs for all 3 seasons with a consistency the storyboard artists built in deliberately. You can, if you want to try it on a rewatch, Track Zuko's internal state through any given scene simply by paying attention to which side of his face the camera is dwelling on. When he saves Aang from Zhao as the blue spirit, the camera balances between both sides, which is precisely right because he is doing the right thing for reasons that are not fully right yet, caught between his nature and his need. When he is alone in the cave with Katara in the second season finale, about to make the choice that will cost him 2 more years, the camera alternates between both sides of his face in close alternation, as if the decision is happening across the geography of his features. There is a scene that illuminates the full weight of the scar symbolism better than any other single moment in the series. In the cave beneath Ba Sing Se, when Katara and Zuko are trapped together and the moment has gone quiet in a way that is fragile and temporary, and both of them know it, Katara takes out a small vial of water she has been carrying from the spirit oasis at the North Pole. Spirit water, the rarest water in the world, kept for something important she has not yet been told. She offers it to him, to heal his scar. It is one of the most quietly devastating moments in 3 seasons of storytelling. She looks at the damage on his face, damage she knows something of the story behind, and she feels something that overrides the context she has every reason to act from. She sees the wound before she sees the enemy, and she reaches for what can close it. Zuko almost takes it. You can see him almost take it. The offer lands. It reaches the part of him that has been trying for years to find the right response to someone treating him as though he deserves care without condition. And then something closes down and he steps back and the moment is over. The refusal is the correct choice made in the wrong direction. The scar is still too central to Zuko's understanding of himself for him to release it. It is the visible record of what his father did to him, and as much pain as it carries, it is also what explains why he is doing what he is doing. The mission, the banishment, the hunt for the Avatar, all of these are organized around the wound. Remove the wound and the organizing principle disappears. Take away the scar and what remains of the story he has been telling himself? He cannot answer those questions yet. So he steps back. He keeps the wound. And then, in the same episode, he makes the choice that sets him back years by siding with Azula in the cave, because the questions his refusal revealed are answered immediately and disastrously by the version of himself that Azula knows exactly how to reach. The 3rd season is Zuko living with the consequences of that choice, and slowly discovering that the consequences are, in the specific way the most transformative consequences always are, exactly what was needed. He gets everything he thought he wanted. His title restored, his father's approval, his place in the Fire Nation's future. He sits in the palace surrounded by the things that were supposed to make him whole and discovers that they do not. The hunger does not stop. The scar does not mean anything different now that he is home. His father's approval, achieved at the cost of every good choice he had almost made, tastes like nothing. There is a psychological framework, Maslow's hierarchy of needs, that several analyses have applied to Zuko's arc, with results that are uncomfortable in how precisely they fit. Maslow proposed that human beings tend to move through layers of need in a recognizable sequence. Physiological survival, then safety and security, then belonging and love, then esteem, and finally, self-actualization. The condition of being fully and without compromise what you are. Zuko at the start of the show is stuck at the safety layer. His physiological needs are met by the ship and the resources of the Fire Nation royalty, but his safety, his sense of where he belongs and what his continued existence in the world is worth, is entirely conditional on achieving a goal that keeps receding. He has no real belonging, no love that is not contingent on his performance, and an esteem that is entirely external, depending on a father whose approval is a moving target that moves every time Zuko gets close to it. Watch him work his way up through the seasons. In the first, he fights for safety, trying to make himself sufficient to earn back the conditional protection of his family. In the second, he discovers belonging in small and temporary forms, in the connection with people who do not know who he is, in the genuine warmth that springs up between him and Katara in the cave when neither of them is performing anything. He loses these glimpses as soon as his identity reasserts itself, because belonging that depends on not knowing who you are is not the real thing. In the third, he has to make a fundamental choice between the version of belonging his father offers, which requires him to be someone he is not, and the version that requires him to become fully who he actually is, which requires him to lose everything his father's version offered. He makes the choice. The scene in the throne room where he tells Ozai what he thinks and turns his back and walks out is not, in the structure of that hierarchy, the achievement of something new. It is the discovery of what was already there when all the false versions of it were removed. He does not become someone good in that moment. He finally stops preventing himself from being who he already was. The scar he carries into the finale and into the legend of Korra as an old man is not the mark of what his father tried to make him anymore. It is the record of where he came from and how far he traveled from it. It is evidence of the most durable kind. The kind that cannot be faked, that took every single day of 3 seasons of a television show to accumulate into something an audience believes without being told to. There is a specific scene in the 3rd season that deserves attention here. One that does not get discussed as often as some of the more dramatic moments, but that is, in many ways, the most precise articulation of who Zuko has finally become. He goes to apologize to Katara, not because he has to, not because anyone is watching, not because it will benefit him strategically. He goes because she is the person he wronged most directly when he made his choice in the cave, and he knows it, and living with that knowledge without addressing it is the kind of thing you cannot do if you are trying to be the person he is trying to be. He tells her he is sorry. He tells her he knows that saying it does not change what happened. He does not ask her to forgive him or tell her that she should. He simply delivers the apology and then he waits. Katara does not forgive him in that scene. She is not ready. And the show does not require her to be ready. The apology is not presented as something that earns forgiveness on delivery. It is presented as something Zuko needed to say and said, regardless of what followed from it. This is a remarkably mature treatment of what an apology actually is. Not a transaction, not a request for absolution. A statement of genuine accountability, offered without conditions, from someone who has finally developed the capacity to account for himself without needing the accounting to produce a specific result. The audience has been watching Zuko for 2.5 seasons at this point. They know how far he has traveled to get to this room, to stand across from this person, to say this thing without softening it or hedging it or asking anything in return. The apology is the scar, transformed, not the wound anymore. The record of the distance traveled from the wound to here. Section 4. Azula's blue flame and the mind that burned itself. Down, she is 14. She is a military commander. She is the person her father sends when the mission requires intelligence and precision rather than force of numbers. Her fire is blue. The show has told you what that means. Blue burns hotter than orange, burns more completely, burns at the temperature of genuine mastery rather than adequate technique. She is, by any firebending metric the show establishes, the most formidable bender of her generation. She has gray eyes that sometimes look silver in certain light, and she never seems afraid, and she moves through rooms the way people move through rooms when it has never once occurred to them that the room might not want them in it. There is an ease to Azula's presence that borders on something the show takes 2.5 seasons to fully name. It is not confidence in the ordinary sense. It is the condition of someone who has closed off access to anything that would require them to admit they are not confident. It is the appearance of invulnerability maintained so completely and for so long that the difference between the appearance and the reality has essentially ceased to exist in any functional sense, until it does not. Azula was raised by a man who understood power as the only real language and who used love, or more specifically, the withdrawal of love, as the primary instrument of his children's formation. Ozai looked at his daughter and saw a talent for firebending that exceeded anyone else in recent Fire Nation history, a strategic intelligence extraordinary for someone her age, and a hunger for his approval that he could shape with precision. He praised her for ruthlessness. He praised her for precision. He compared her favorably to Zuko whenever Zuko showed softness, which was often, because Zuko's softness was not a failure of will but a feature of his nature, the thing his mother recognized and loved, and his father could not forgive. Every comparison that ended with Azula on the winning side was also a lesson. The lesson was not complicated. This is how I matter. This is how I earn the thing that is not quite freely given in this family. I am the sharp one, the precise one, the one who does not disappoint, and I will be the one he keeps. Ursa's love for Zuko was more visible, more expressed, more of the kind that children can point to and recognize. This was not because she did not love Azula. It was because Zuko, who was soft and hurt and visibly needed her, was easier for Ursa to reach than Azula, who was composed and controlled and frighteningly capable, and seemed to need nothing from anyone. Ursa had a child who appeared to require no intervention. She did not look closely enough to see that the composure was not strength, it was armor. It was a small child who had learned that needing things was dangerous, and so had taught herself not to need them in any way that could be observed. The theory about Azula's psychological development is not difficult to articulate, and the evidence across the 3 seasons of the show is overwhelming once you are looking for it. She is not a person without emotion. She is a person who was taught, with great consistency and from early childhood, that visible emotion was a form of weakness that would cost her the only kind of love her household offered. She learned to express need through the acquisition of dominance, rather than through the direct statement of what she needed. She became, in the most specific sense, exactly what her father built her to become. What makes her so devastating to watch in the final season is the precision of what breaks her. It is not a military defeat. It is not Zuko opposing her. It is not even Ozai removing her from the conquest mission. It is Mai and Ty Lee. Mai and Ty Lee have been Azula's allies throughout the show. She recruited them. She controls them through a combination of something that genuinely functions like affection and the constant background presence of what will happen if they disappoint her. They are, within the narrow emotional vocabulary available to Azula, the people she has allowed inside the walls. At the Boiling Rock, Mai chooses Zuko over Azula. She looks at what is happening and makes a decision that costs her everything Azula's protection has offered and does it anyway. Because Zuko matters more to her in the specific way that genuine love, as opposed to loyalty organized by fear, always tends to generate choices like this one. And then Ty Lee acts to protect Mai, the second choice in rapid succession, from the only 2 people Azula had trusted. After Mai and Ty Lee, the wall has a crack in it. You can see Azula working harder than before to maintain her composure, taking extra time to perform certainty in situations where she used to simply be certain. The performance is the signal. People who are genuinely certain do not perform it. They simply are it. The performance means something underneath has shifted. By the night before her coronation, the shift has become a fracture. She sends away her entire staff. She is alone in a palace that is about to be officially hers. That was her goal, that she has earned by every metric she was given for measuring achievement, and the victory feels like nothing at all. She sees her mother in the mirror. The vision speaks to her with tenderness, says something loving and means it. And Azula shatters the mirror. She shatters it because the offer of unconditional love, arriving from the face she associated most completely with the love that was always conditional in her experience, is not something she has the architecture to receive. Her entire self was built to earn love through performance. Love offered without performance is not recognizable to her as love. It is a threat. It is the removal of the only system she knows for navigating the relationship between effort and worth. If love is just given freely, if it does not need to be earned, then everything she sacrificed to become what she has purchased, nothing real. The Agni Kai between Zuko and Azula is the show's final word on both characters simultaneously, and it is told in the language of color. The arena holds 2 fires, his orange and her blue. Zuko's orange burns steadily throughout. Azula's blue begins to destabilize, flickering between blue and orange, going wide and uneven in ways that have never characterized her bending before. The color instability is the psychological instability made visible. The fire is falling apart because she is falling apart. The precision is gone not because the technique has failed, but because the foundation of the technique has been removed, and without the foundation, nothing can hold its form. Zuko does not defeat Azula through superior firebending. He stays standing. He holds his ground, and he is still there when she begins to lose the thread. He is not the agent of her destruction. He is the witness of it. The agent was her father, who built her for a purpose and then discarded her before she could fully use it, and left her with the machinery of greatness and nothing to aim it at except herself. The final image of Azula is her on the ground in chains in the rain, in a state the show depicts with no protective softening, a child destroyed by the people who were supposed to protect her in a way that is entirely and specifically legible as destruction rather than defeat. She is 14. She is screaming in the rain. The person who put her there is not standing in that arena. He is in a prison cell somewhere, stripped of his bending. She is his masterpiece. She is his mistake. The show asks you to see both of those things with equal clarity. Section 5. The air nomads were not all gone. The genocide of the air nomads is the event that precedes the entire story. 100 years before the ice breaks, Fire Lord Sozin used the power of his comet to launch simultaneous assaults on all 4 air temples. The air nomads were not a military culture. They had no standing army, no organized defense, no tradition of warfare to draw on. They had airbending, which is extraordinary in an individual practitioner, and the numbers of a nomadic people who were not prepared for what came for them. The show tells us that Sozin's intention was the total eradication of the air nomads, and his tactical reasoning was specific. The next avatar would be born among them. By eliminating the air nomads entirely, he would ensure that the next avatar, if they were born at all, would be born without a culture, without masters, without the infrastructure of training and tradition the avatar's formation requires. The plan came close to working completely. But air nomads were nomadic by definition. They traveled. This was not incidental to their identity but central to it. They moved continuously between the 4 air temples and through the wider world, visiting other nations, trading, maintaining the network of relationships that connected them to the rest of humanity. At any given moment, a portion of the air nomad population would have been outside the temples, traveling through the Earth Kingdom, passing through Water Tribe territory, possibly even living, temporarily, in the Fire Nation itself. The question the genocide raises, the one the show deliberately leaves open, is what happened to those people? The theory about Ty Lee begins with her eyes and expands outward from there. In the show's visual language, gray eyes are an air nomad feature. Aang has gray eyes. The monks depicted in flashbacks have gray eyes. Air nomad culture and gray eyes are associated visually throughout the show consistently enough to register as intentional design. And Ty Lee, Fire Nation noblewoman and circus acrobat, also has gray eyes. Not amber, not gold. The gray the show associates specifically with the air nomads. Beyond the eye color, there is chi blocking itself. Ty Lee disables benders by striking specific acupressure points on the body, temporarily cutting off access to chi and making bending impossible. This technique is not taught in the Fire Nation. The show presents it as Ty Lee's unique gift, something she has a natural aptitude for that exceeds what training alone could produce. No other Fire Nation character in the entire series demonstrates this ability. Chi blocking is, at its philosophical and practical foundation, deeply related to the airbending tradition. Both disciplines require an unusual sensitivity to the movement of energy through living bodies. Both require a degree of body awareness and proprioceptive precision. The show elsewhere associates with air nomad practice. The system of chakras and chi pathways that forms the basis of airbending philosophy is precisely the system that chi blocking engages with. When Ty Lee strikes those specific points, she is engaging with a map of the body's energy flow, developed and refined in the air nomad tradition. The most complete version of this theory connects Ty Lee to Kuzan, mentioned in the first season as one of Aang's closest friends from the years before the war, a Fire Nation boy who maintained a genuine friendship with an air nomad monk. The theory proposes that Kuzan, or someone in his family line, provided cover for air nomads who survived Sozin's assault, perhaps taking them in, perhaps intermarrying with them. Children born from those unions in the Fire Nation would have been indistinguishable from Fire Nation citizens in every observable respect. Over 3 or 4 generations, the air nomad heritage would be essentially invisible in terms of cultural practice. But physical traits persist, gray eyes persist, and gifts that run in families persist, passing from generation to generation as something the family can no longer explain or name, but that is undeniably there. Ty Lee does not know any of this. She is simply herself, a cheerful and extraordinarily gifted person with a talent for disabling benders and an unusual lightness of movement that even Azula finds genuinely impressive. But if the theory is right, she is carrying something forward in herself without knowing she is carrying it. She is the living record of an air nomad ancestor who chose 100 years ago to survive in whatever form survival was available, to become invisible, to pass the gift forward in the only form the burning of everything else left intact. The theory about Zahir from the legend of Korra adds another dimension. Zahir is a non-bender who receives airbending when Korra opens the spirit portals. Most new airbenders in that event are clumsy and startled. Zahir is fluent almost immediately. He moves with the ease not of someone discovering a new ability, but of someone who has been thinking deeply about an ability for years and is finally able to embody the thinking. More tellingly, Zahir knows things. He knows air nomad philosophy in depth and in detail. He knows the specific traditions, the specific masters, the particular teachings of historical airbenders like Guru Lahima, whose work is obscure enough that casual cultural interest would not produce this level of familiarity. He knows the inside of the tradition rather than its outside surface. The theory: Zahir spent significant time as an air acolyte. After the 100-Year War ended, Avatar Aang worked to restore air nomad culture by establishing communities of air acolytes, people from all nations who chose to learn and practice air nomad traditions to keep the culture alive. Zahir, whose knowledge of the tradition is too specific and too interior to be explained by external study alone, was likely among these acolytes. He may have sat with Aang directly. He may have been, for a significant portion of his life, precisely the kind of person who could have been trusted with the most sacred aspects of the tradition, before drawing from those aspects conclusions the tradition itself would not have sanctioned. This is what makes Zahir not just dangerous but philosophically coherent. He is not misunderstanding airbending philosophy when he uses Lagama's principles to achieve flight through radical detachment from earthly tethers. He is pushing the philosophy further than its designers intended, taking it to a conclusion they did not reach, but doing so from a position of genuine understanding rather than ignorance. He is one of the most faithful students the air nomad tradition ever produced. He simply took it somewhere it was not meant to go. Section 6. Bloodbending, Hama, and the chain that never breaks. Let us talk about Hama slowly, because Hama deserves to be understood rather than simply categorized. She is introduced in the 3rd season's 8th episode, The Puppet Master, structured from its opening frame as a horror story. The production team changed the color palette for this episode. Darker blues, deeper shadows, less warmth than any surface the light touches. They changed the pacing. Slower cuts, longer silences between dialogue. They changed the musical language, strings that suggest unease without declaring it. Every craft decision signals that what is being introduced belongs to a different genre, something older and darker. Hama is a Southern Water Tribe woman who was captured by the Fire Nation in the raids that targeted the Southern Tribe's waterbenders. Katara's people, Katara's tradition, Katara's cultural inheritance, predating Katara by decades. The raids that left Katara, when we meet her in the 1st episode, as the last waterbender in the entire Southern Ocean. Hama was imprisoned in a Fire Nation jail. She spent years there with stone walls around her and no water, no source of her element, cut off from the sea and the moon and the practice and the community and everything that had made her who she was. She survived it by finding resources that are not obvious, by pushing the limits of what she knew until she found the edges of something she had not known was possible. In that cell, with no visible water, she began to work with what was available, trace amounts of moisture in the stone of the walls. She trained herself to feel for it, to bend quantities so small that most practitioners would not recognize them as bendable at all. And when she had exhausted what the stone could provide, she found the water inside living things, inside herself. And eventually she found the largest concentrated source of water in any sealed room containing a human being, the blood. The human body is approximately 60 to 70% water by mass. The blood circulates water through every tissue in the body constantly. A waterbender who has trained for years to feel for water she cannot see, who has developed the specific sensitivity that comes from bending moisture through stone, can find all of this. And a waterbender who can find it can move it. She escaped. She settled in a Fire Nation village and spent the years of her new life there, taking Fire Nation people on full moon nights, using the bending she had discovered in captivity to drag them off the road and put them in a cell that was a precise replica of the one that had held her. She did not kill them, she imprisoned them. Now here is where the chain begins. The chain that connects Hama's survival to a grief Katara carries in her chest for the entire run of the show. Before Hama escaped, the Fire Nation's policy for Southern Water Tribe waterbenders was capture and imprisonment. They took them alive. The raids were designed to collect rather than kill. After Hama escaped, the policy changed. The show states this directly, in Hama's own words. After her escape, after a Water Tribe waterbender had demonstrated she could use her element to escape from a Fire Nation prison and spend years in retribution, the Fire Nation could not immediately stop. The Fire Nation decided that a captive waterbender was too dangerous to keep. The new policy was not capture, it was kill. Katara's mother, Kia, died in a Fire Nation raid. She was killed protecting Katara, telling the soldiers she was the waterbender, so that Katara, whose bending had not yet manifested clearly enough for the soldiers to identify her, would be overlooked. The soldiers, operating under the new policy, did not take Kia prisoner. They killed her. Trace the chain. Hama survives captivity. Hama discovers bloodbending. Hama escapes using it. The Fire Nation is frightened enough by what she accomplished to change its policy. The policy changes from capture to kill. The next raid on the southern tribe finds a woman who claims to be a waterbender. Under the new policy, they kill her. She had a daughter. The daughter grows up without a mother and carries that absence in her body for the rest of her life. The show does not draw this diagram for you. It gives you the pieces across separate episodes and seasons and trusts you to assemble them. Hama did not kill Katara's mother. Nothing about this reading is meant to locate moral responsibility in a woman who survived a prison camp and fought back with the only tool she had available. The Fire Nation killed Katara's mother. The Fire Nation made every single choice in this chain, but cause and effect do not observe the categories of moral responsibility. Hama's survival produced consequences Hama did not intend and could not have predicted. This is what the show is describing about the nature of violence in a world at war. Cruelty does not stay where it is placed, it moves. It transforms as it travels from person to person, becoming something different in each new vessel, but always carrying the essential quality of the original damage forward. The Fire Nation damaged Hama. The damage Hama inflicted on the Fire Nation's sense of security changed the Fire Nation's behavior. The changed behavior damaged Katara. The damage Katara carries is then placed inside her by Hama herself, when Hama teaches her bloodbending in the episode, pressing the knowledge into her the way a key is pressed into a lock. Hama laughs when she is led away in chains. She says she has won. She means the transmission of the technique. But she has also won in a different and darker sense. The damage continues. The chain has a new link. The wound has a new carrier. What the show asks you to notice is what Katara does with the knowledge. She uses it once, in a situation where she has no other choice, and then she puts it away. She does not become Hama. She carries the knowledge and she carries the grief, and she continues in the direction of the person she was trying to be before Hama found her. The chain is real. The choice about what to do with it is also real. That is the entire moral structure of the episode, delivered without a single explicit statement of that structure anywhere in the dialogue. Section 7. The Lion Turtle and the Answer Hidden in the Beginning. The most common criticism of Avatar's finale centers on the lion turtle, the argument that it felt like an invention designed to rescue the narrative from a dilemma the writers created for themselves. Aang, an air nomad who cannot kill, must defeat a man who cannot be safely left alive. Nobody Aang consults can give him a solution honoring both requirements simultaneously. And then, 2 days before the comet, an island turns out to be an ancient creature that gives him the missing piece. The argument is not entirely without merit as a structural observation. The lion turtle does arrive quickly in the narrative sense. There is no long arc building directly to it through logical plot steps. What there is instead is preparation working through philosophical groundwork rather than plot mechanics. And understanding this distinction is the key to seeing why the lion turtle is not a last-minute invention, but the final piece of an argument the show has been making since its second season. Go back to the Eastern Air Temple in Book 2 and the episodes with Guru Pathik. Pathik is a figure without a clear national affiliation, a man of no particular political loyalty who has lived alone at the Air Temple for decades and achieved a degree of spiritual clarity belonging to a very small and specific category of human beings. He teaches Aang about the 7 chakras, the energy centers of the body that must be opened for the Avatar to fully access the Avatar state. He teaches Aang about the 6th chakra specifically. The 6th chakra, he says, is the chakra of insight, and it is blocked by the illusion of separation. He explains that the human mind creates a story about the world in which you are separate from the people and things around you, in which there is a meaningful boundary between your inner life and everything outside it. He says this story is not true, that the separation is an illusion, that all living things are connected at a level the ordinary experience of being a person does not let you feel, but that is real and foundational and the deepest truth of the world's structure. Aang hears this and applies it to the situation Pathak intends, letting go of his attachment to Katara. This is the emotional application, and it is difficult and appropriate. But the philosophical content of what Pathak is saying is much larger than any single relationship. He is describing, in philosophical language, the basis on which energy bending is not only possible but natural. He is describing why it is coherent to reach into another person's life energy and engage with it directly, because the separation between your energy and theirs is not ultimately real. The connection is the reality. The separation is what we impose on the reality. Energy bending works because living things share a common underlying life energy. The lion turtle, when it teaches Aang, is completing a sentence that Guru Pathak began in the second season. The sixth chakra lesson was not only about love and attachment. It was the metaphysical prerequisite for understanding why the resolution the lion turtle offers is not a cheat, but a completion. The visual foreshadowing is placed deliberately in the second and third seasons at easy-to-miss moments. The library episode in Book 2 contains a brief shot of a scroll depicting a lion turtle clearly enough for a careful viewer to notice. The Fire Nation underground bunker during the Day of Black Sun has a lion turtle carving visible in the background during the scene where Zuko confronts his father. These appearances last only a few seconds each and are never called out by the characters. The creators have confirmed in interviews that these were deliberate placements. The lion turtle was in the world from the beginning. The foreshadowing was real. Here is the structural reading that makes the lion turtle not an interruption of the story, but its fulfillment. Aang's problem is not a plot problem. It is a character problem, which is to say it is the real kind. The entire series has been building, through Aang's specific character, toward the question of what happens when the Avatar's spiritual depth is sufficient to access something that precedes and underlies all four elements and their bending systems. The Avatar is the bridge between the physical and spiritual worlds. The Avatar is the person whose spiritual architecture was designed to hold the full range of the world's elemental energy. Aang is not given a cheat code. He is given access to something that has always been latent in the Avatar position, something that only becomes accessible when the Avatar is ready for it. The lion turtle tests him not through a trial of combat, but through the simple fact of what Aang already is. The creature looks at this boy and sees an unbendable spirit. It gives him the ability because he has already done the work that makes the ability usable rather than destructive. The key phrase the lion turtle uses, "The true heart can touch the poison of hatred without being harmed." This is not describing a technique. It is describing a quality of character. The energy bending does not work because Aang learns how to do it. It works because Aang is the person he is. The thing that seemed like the obstacle, his unwillingness to kill, turns out to be the qualification. The character who could not kill Ozai is the only character whose spirit is strong enough to touch Ozai's without being absorbed by it. The resolution was built into the character from the beginning. Every episode that established who Aang was, every moment of his compassion and his stubbornness and his refusal to become something else, was building the justification for the resolution. The lion turtle is the last piece. But the pieces that made the lion turtle's gift possible were accumulated across 60 episodes. You were watching the preparation for the entire series. You just did not know yet what it was preparing for. Section 8. The Spirit World and the Eternity Admiral Zhao earned. The Spirit World is not peaceful. It is often depicted in Avatar as visually strange, emotionally responsive, beautiful in unsettling ways. But the deeper truth about it only becomes clear in the legend of Korra. It amplifies. Whatever quality of spirit you carry across the boundary between the physical world and the spirit dimension, you will find that quality waiting for you, magnified and reflected in the environment you inhabit there. For Iroh, who carries love and patience and the specific piece of someone who has worked very hard and long to want the right things, the spirit world is a tea shop, warmth and company and the satisfaction of service. For Admiral Zhao, who carries ambition and rage and the consuming need to be recognized as the man who destroyed something irreplaceable. The spirit world is the fog of lost souls. The fog of lost souls is revealed in the legend of Korra as a region of the spirit world where spirits imprison people who have committed offenses against the spiritual order of the world. The fog works by taking the most obsessive thought, the most defining memory, the thing a person's identity most completely organized itself around, and making that thing the entirety of the person's experience. It loops without variation. It offers no exits. The person trapped within it relives the central moment of their worst self endlessly, without the relief of unconsciousness, without the interruption of other experiences, without the possibility of growth or change. Zhao is there. Tenzin and his siblings find him in The Legend of Korra's second season. He has been in the fog for 70 years. He is not coherent. He is muttering in fragments and repetitions about the moon spirit, about how he killed it, about his greatness, about how he will be remembered as the man who destroyed the moon. He does not know where he is. He does not know how long he has been there. He is caught in the single moment he organized his entire identity around. The precision of the punishment is not incidental. Zhao killed the moon spirit because he wanted to be the man who did something that would be remembered forever. He wanted recognition that would be permanent and world-changing and impossible to take from him. The fog gives him exactly this, with one terrible modification. He gets to think about it forever, without anyone else to be recognized by, without any witness to the recognition except himself. In the gray and formless space of his own amplified obsession, the monument is the prison. The desire for permanent recognition is the cage. The Iroh contrast is one of the most elegant structural observations in the entire Avatar mythology. Two men who both had significant relationships with the spirit world. Two men who both did enormous things in their physical lives. Two men who both ended up in the spirit world as permanent residents. The gulf between their experiences of it is total. Zhao is trapped in formless gray, reduced to the single obsession that defined him, unable to grow or change. Iroh is in his tea shop, serving tea to spirits, warm and available and at peace, present for anyone who needs him. The difference between them is not power or intelligence or the magnitude of what they accomplished. It is the quality of what they were working toward. Zhao worked toward recognition, toward domination, toward the permanent record of his greatness. Iroh worked toward balance, toward wisdom, toward the condition of his nephew and the condition of the world. The spirit world does not judge between these. It simply reflects. And what Zhao's spirit reflected back at full amplitude was the consuming hunger of a man who had spent his life trying to be remembered for destroying something beautiful. There is a further theory about Aang's 100 years in the ice that connects to this understanding. We have established that the Avatar state was active during the century of his preservation, which means Aang's spirit was in some operative relationship with the spiritual fabric of the world throughout that period. Not conscious, not navigating the spirit world with any awareness or intention, but present, in the way a fire is present in a room even when no one is watching it. If the spirit world amplifies and reflects, then an avatar spirit present in it during a century of spiritual imbalance would have been absorbing and registering that imbalance at a level below conscious experience. Spirit suffering because the world was out of balance. The spiritual ecology of the world degrading under 100 years of conquest and cultural destruction. All of this present in the ambient spiritual environment where Aang's spirit was also present. This is why Aang's sensitivity to the spirit world, when we meet him, is not fully explained by training or tradition. 100 years of unconscious immersion does not produce conscious knowledge, but it produces something more fundamental, a resonance, a quality of attunement, an instinctive responsiveness to the spiritual dimension that conscious meditation across a single lifetime could not have generated. He woke up already knowing the spirit world in the way that people immersed in a language from the earliest age know it, not better than people who studied carefully, but differently. From inside. Section 9. The 100-Year War and what it was really saying. Let us be direct about what the Fire Nation is. Not as a fantasy civilization designed to provide the story with a coherent antagonist, as a description, rendered in the language of elemental fantasy, of how imperial conquest functions in the real world across history. The most discussed historical parallel is the one the show's creators have been most willing to confirm in interviews. The Hundred-Year War bears significant structural resemblance to the Second World War and the Fire Nation's specific combination of military aggression, cultural supremacist ideology, and industrial capacity maps onto the historical record of particular 20th century imperial powers in ways that are too precise and too consistent to be accidental. A nation with an explicit ideology of cultural superiority launches a campaign of expansion that begins with the total elimination of a specific group of people and proceeds through the military occupation of most of the known world. The other nations, initially fragmented and unable to coordinate an effective response, must eventually find a way to work together or be absorbed. But the show is not only about the Second World War. It is also about colonialism as an ongoing structural phenomenon rather than a single historical event. The Fire Nation does not conquer and leave. It occupies. It extracts resources. It installs administrative systems. It re-educates the populations under its control. The third season episode where Aang attends a Fire Nation school undercover is one of the most politically pointed sequences in the entire series, and it operates according to a logic drawn from the documented history of colonial education across multiple countries, cultures, and centuries. Fire Nation children are taught a version of history in which the other nations were struggling and failing before the Fire Nation arrived to help them, in which the Fire Nation's expansion was a gift rather than a theft, in which certain words do not appear in the curriculum, because there is no educational system in any nation that has committed atrocities that teaches its children. This is what happened. They are taught to be proud of what their nation has done. They are taught that the other nation's resistance is evidence of ingratitude rather than legitimate grievance. They are taught these things not because their teachers are monsters, but because their teachers were taught the same things by their teachers, and the system perpetuates itself through everyone who participates in it without asking the questions the system does not want asked. The show depicts this without making a speech about it. No character turns to the camera and explains the mechanism. The episode shows you what Fire Nation School looks like. The rigid formation, the nationalistic music, the history lesson in which the teacher describes the 100-Year War as the Fire Nation's generous gift to the world, the art class in which expression is permitted only within approved subjects. You watch it happening. You recognize the shape of it or you do not, depending on what you already know. Either way, the shape is there. Ba Sing Se is the show's other great political set piece, and it operates on a different but equally real axis. Ba Sing Se is not the Fire Nation. It is supposedly the center of resistance to the Fire Nation, the city that has never fallen, the place where Earth Kingdom culture and knowledge survived through 100 years of war. And inside its walls, the system the Dai Li have built under Long Feng's direction has produced a population that does not know a war is happening. There is no war in Ba Sing Se. This phrase is said not by Fire Nation propagandists, but by citizens of the city supposedly fighting the Fire Nation. The mechanism is not external to Ba Sing Se. It was built inside it by an Earth Kingdom institution, originally designed to protect Earth Kingdom culture. The Dai Li were created by Avatar Kyoshi to protect Ba Sing Se's cultural heritage. By the time of the show, they are the instrument of Long Feng's political control. Long Feng does not want the Fire Nation to win. He wants to remain in control of Ba Sing Se. The war, if Ba Sing Se's citizens fully understood it, would generate demands on the city that would threaten the administrative structure that makes Long Feng's power possible. A king who understood his own situation would not tolerate the kind of management Long Feng practices. So Long Feng ensures the king does not understand his situation. And he ensures the citizens do not either, through a system of information suppression that has been operating long enough that most of the city's inhabitants genuinely cannot conceive of the war as real. They have been not merely deceived but reconstructed. Their model of reality has been replaced by an authorized version, and the original is no longer available as a reference. The show presents this without making it legible as an explicit critique. It shows you what it looks like. It shows you Ju Di, the government handler with the smile that never varies, and the specific quality of that smile. The smile of someone whose affect has been so thoroughly standardized that the distinction between performance and person has ceased to exist. It shows you the Earth King, a person who is not unintelligent and not unkind, having no idea that his city is about to be taken from the inside because the people responsible for keeping him informed have decided his information is theirs to manage? The broader observation the show is making, and this is the thing that makes Ba Sing Se more unsettling than any Fire Nation scene, is that authoritarian information control does not require an authoritarian ideology. It requires only a concentration of power sufficient to make information management possible and an incentive to manage it. The mechanism does not care about the specific beliefs of anyone operating it. It functions through the logic of its own incentives. A show that describes this, in a children's animated series airing on a Saturday afternoon, and describes it accurately and in detail without simplifying it into a cartoon of evil for the convenience of young viewers, is doing something unusual. It is trusting its audience with a complex and accurate model of how power maintains itself, without a single character standing up to explain the model in summary. The explanation is in the depiction. The critique is in the accuracy. The Fire Nation's technology deserves attention here as well. The steam-powered ships, the war balloons, the mechanized drill, the factories. The show does not explain where all of this came from through any single exposition scene. It trusts you to understand how conquest compounds. 100 years of extracting resources from the Earth Kingdom, the Water Tribes, and the ruins of the Air Temples produces a material advantage that grows over time. Every Fire Nation ship is built from metal, extracted from occupied territory. Every Fire Nation forge is fueled by coal from Earth Kingdom mines. The technological superiority is not the cause of the conquest, it is the product of it, and then it is the tool that makes continued conquest easier. Conquest feeds itself. The inequality between the Fire Nation and the rest of the world at the end of the 100-Year War is larger than the inequality that existed at the beginning, not because the Fire Nation people are inherently more talented or creative, but because 100 years of taking from others compounds. The other nations did not fall behind. They were pushed. Section 10. Sokka, the Meteor, and What the Moon Left Behind. Let us talk about Sokka, because Sokka is the character where the show's most sophisticated thinking about value and contribution and what it means to matter is stored. Not Aang, whose journey is about the weight of a role. Not Zuko, whose journey is about the construction and deconstruction of a false self. Sokka, the only non-bender in the primary group, the funny one, the one who plans things rather than executes them with spectacular elemental power, the one who has to do everything the hard way. He is 16 in the first episode. He is the only young man remaining in the Southern Water Tribe's small camp of tents on the ice, because all the adult men, including his father, have gone to fight in the war. He is technically the village's protector. He is responsible for a group of children more interested in playing than military training, and for the security of a small community that is essentially defenseless in a world actively at war. He takes this responsibility completely seriously while being constitutionally unable to prevent much of it from being very funny. He is also, from the first episode, the one who notices when something is wrong. Not through bending or spiritual sensitivity, but through the practical attention that belongs to someone who has been paying the kind of attention that does not get to use supernatural shortcuts. When Jet seems exciting but his reasoning does not add up, Sokka follows him and discovers the plan to flood a civilian village. When the bounty hunter's Shershu hunts by smell, Sokka is the one who remembers the perfume from the abbey and figures out how to stop it. When the Fire Nation drill appears at Ba Sing Se's walls and the Earth Kingdom military strategy amounts to throwing rocks at the outside of it, Sokka is the one who identifies the internal structural vulnerability and proposes the plan that eventually works. The show demonstrates Sokka's intelligence across 3 seasons, not through any single revelatory moment but through accumulation. He figures out that the Fire Nation's most vulnerable moment is a solar eclipse, inferring it from a reference to the darkest day in Fire Nation history in Wan Shitong's library, and following the chain of reasoning to a military plan that he then designs and leads. He invents a hot air balloon after recognizing the principles involved from the Fire Nation's war balloon technology, a contribution significant enough that the Fire Nation steals the design for military use. He talks pirates into betraying Zuko in the first season by simply and loudly raising the question of who gets the capture reward when there are 2 interested parties. He destroys the Fire Nation's airship fleet in the finale by crashing one airship across the backs of the others in a plan he names, with characteristic Sokka style, the airship slice. The show's thesis about Sokka is delivered most directly in the episode where he trains with the sword master Piandao in the third season. Piandao tells him that his greatness does not come from any element, that it comes from his creativity and his intelligence and his ability to see what others cannot see. He is not telling Sokka something Sokka does not deserve to hear. He is naming, for the audience as much as for the character, the thing the show has been demonstrating for 60 episodes that the audience may not have had language for, because most of the show's spectacle belongs to bending. Sokka's arc does not have a Zuko-style transformation, a single definable shift from one thing to another. It does not have a Toph-style discovery of a fundamentally new capability. It has 100 small moments of being exactly what the situation needed, accumulated so gradually that you may not notice any individual one, but you feel the weight of all of them together when you reach the finale. He is the sum of his own attention, paid in small amounts continuously over 3 seasons, to everything the people around him needed that their bending could not provide. The day of Black Sun is a solar eclipse. The sun is blocked by the moon. The solar eclipse plan, the greatest military contribution Sokka makes to the war effort, is a day whose astronomical mechanism involves the moon covering the sun. Yu is the moon. The darkest day for the Fire Nation is the day the moon wins. Whether you read intention into this or coincidence, the structure is there, and the structure multiplies when you keep looking. The invasion that Sokka plans and leads, the one that comes closest to ending the war before the finale, happens on a day named for the moon. The fleet that Sokka destroys in the finale, using a plan that is all geometry and momentum and the specific kind of brilliance that sees an obvious solution no one else bothered to see, happens in the sky, the moon's domain. Sokka's 2 greatest military contributions to the war effort are both, in some sense, happening in Yue's territory. The sky, the astronomical, the domain of the entity she became. Whether you believe the meteor theory or not, whether you think the moon had any conscious role in any of this or not, the show built that structure into the story. The structure is there whether or not anyone was arranging it. And sometimes the most meaningful patterns are the ones that emerge from the accumulated weight of a story told with enough care that its pieces fit together in ways that reveal more than the person assembling them may have consciously planned. This is the thing about Sokka specifically, and about the show's treatment of non-benders more broadly, that is worth staying with a little longer. The show is set in a world where bending exists, where some people can move elements with their bodies and their minds, and where this ability is culturally significant and widely valued. In that world, a non-bender is by definition someone who lacks the thing that confers the most visible form of status and power in most of the show's cultures. Sokka is surrounded by people with powers he does not have. He is surrounded by them his entire life, but especially from the moment he joins Team Avatar. Aang is the most spiritually significant being alive, the Avatar, the bridge between worlds, the hope of an entire planet. Katara becomes, across 3 seasons, one of the most powerful waterbenders who has ever lived. Toph invents an entirely new category of bending from scratch, inside a cave, on an afternoon when most people would have given up. Zuko is a fire-bending prodigy who carries a century of royal training in his body, and Sokka figures out how to destroy the Fire Nation's airship fleet by crashing one ship into the others. He figures out that a solar eclipse creates a tactical window. He figures out that the bounty hunter's Shirshu can be confused by overwhelming it with competing scents. He figures out again and again the things that bending cannot figure out, because bending is a different kind of intelligence than the one Sokka has, and the show is careful enough to understand that different kinds of intelligence are not ranked in any natural order of importance. The show's argument about Sokka is an argument about all of us who are not the benders. All of us who do not have the superpower, the extraordinary gift, the thing that makes other people stop and stare. The argument is, you can still be the one who figures out how to crash the airships. You can still be indispensable. You can still be the person without whom the world would not have been saved, for reasons that the people with powers would not have arrived at on their own. The show makes this argument not through speeches, but through plot. It makes Sokka's intelligence genuinely necessary, puts the story in situations where his specific kind of thinking is the thing that turns the tide, and then it trusts you to understand what you are being shown. Now, the meteor. In the 3rd season's first episode, a meteor falls from the sky. It crashes into the Earth Kingdom. The Benders manage the fire it starts. Sokka was watching Momo. He feels, in that moment, the specific and recurring discomfort of being the one who watches while his friends do extraordinary things. He decides he needs a weapon, not his boomerang, which he still loves and still carries. Something that is his in a way that comes from his own developing skill, rather than from the tradition he was handed. Something forged from his own choices, rather than inherited from his culture. He finds a weaponsmith willing to work the meteorite. He finds Piandao. He makes the black sword, light and sharp and made from something that came from outside the world entirely, from the dark between stars. It is completely his, in a way no weapon he has carried before has been. The theory. The meteor was sent by Yue. Yue sacrificed herself at the end of the first season. The moon spirit had been killed by Zhao, and the moon was fading, and the waterbenders were losing everything, and Yue had been carrying a piece of the moon spirit's energy inside her since birth, used to save her when she was dying as an infant. She gave it back. The moon spirit accepted. Yue became the moon, her body still on the ground in the spirit oasis, while her spirit became the cold silver light over every ocean in the world. From the moon, she sees everything. The show establishes this. In the Boiling Rock episode, Sokka looks up at the moon and speaks to her, and it is not played as grief or performance but as the ordinary address of someone who has accepted the changed form of a relationship and still maintains it in the new form available. He still carries her. The loss is present in him without dominating him, the way significant losses are present in people who are still moving forward. If Yue is the moon, and the moon has power over the tides and over waterbenders, and over the movement of things in the world connected to it, then the question is whether that influence extends to other things, to the trajectory of objects in the sky, to the landing places of falling rocks, to the specific location where a particular meteorite comes down on a particular night. The theory does not require Yue to consciously direct the meteor. It requires only that she is what she is, a cosmic entity with a relationship to the world that includes influence over certain kinds of movement, and that something in the nature of that relationship meant the rock fell where it fell. A piece of the sky, falling in fire, landing close enough for the person she chose to find it and to know, at some level he cannot articulate, that it was meant to be picked up. He picks it up. He makes the sword. He uses it in the finale, flying between burning airships in the last hours of the war, a non-bender doing impossible things with a black blade made from space, in the sky above the Earth Kingdom, with the world in the balance. The boomerang does not come back in the finale. For 61 episodes, every time Sokka throws it, it comes back. This is a running joke, and it is also a metaphor the show has been building across 3 seasons. The boomerang always returns, the way Sokka always returns to his people, the way the water tribe is always somewhere inside him no matter how far he travels. And in the finale, in the chaos above the airships, the boomerang is thrown and the chaos swallows it, and it does not come back. The show does not comment on this. There is no moment where Sokka stops and mourns it. The story is ending, and the war is ending, and there is no space for a pause. But the absence is there. The show put it there deliberately. The thing that always returned did not return, once, in the biggest moment. He still has the meteor sword, the thing that came from outside the world, the gift from the sky. Final section. The cycle continues, and the balance holds. The Avatar cycle is not only a mythological mechanism for managing spiritual continuity. At its deepest level, it is a system for the accumulation of human wisdom across time. Every avatar who has ever lived adds their experience to the inheritance when they die. Every struggle, every choice, every impossible situation navigated to some kind of resolution, banks in the spiritual reserve that the next avatar will draw from. The total grows with every generation. The inheritance becomes richer, more varied, more complete in its coverage of what human experience can look like. Aang, at 12 years old, is carrying 10,000 years of that inheritance in the part of himself that connects to the avatar state. He does not always access it consciously. 12-year-olds do not naturally think to consult 10,000 years of accumulated wisdom before making a decision, but it is available to him. In the moments that demand it, the avatar state that activates is not a power amplifier. It is the full weight of every person who held this role before him, pressing forward through his body and his spirit to meet whatever the moment requires. Think about what that actually means, held at the right distance and the right quietness to feel its full weight. Wan, the very first Avatar, who lived 10,000 years ago in a world that looked nothing like the world of the show, who merged with Rava to keep Vatu imprisoned and died alone after a lifetime of trying to correct a mistake he had made in youth. His experience is in there. His grief and his love and the specific loneliness of someone who became more than human and could not go back to being less, all of that. Archived. Available. Part of the inheritance Aang carries. Avatar Yang Chen, who the show briefly depicts as one of the Avatar's Aang contacts when he is trying to understand what his duty requires. She told Aang, bluntly and without apology, that an air nomad avatar cannot cling to the air nomad tradition of non-attachment when the world requires active engagement. She carried the burden of compromising her spiritual ideals for the sake of the world's physical needs, and that compromise, that cost, is also in the archive. Aang knows it is possible because Yang Chen did it. He knows it is painful because Yang Chen felt it. The archive is not just wisdom, it is precedent. It is the full human record of what this role has asked of the people who held it before. When Aang stands in the Wulong forest and presses his thumbs to Ozai's temples, it is not Aang's individual spirit pressing against Ozai's. It is 10,000 years of accumulated human compassion and stubbornness and love and the refusal to become the thing it was fighting, pressing against the spirit of one man who chose none of those qualities and organized his entire life around their absence. Ozai's spirit is strong. He has spent 50 years cultivating the specific kind of strength that comes from never admitting doubt, never permitting vulnerability, turning every human impulse toward softness into an impulse toward domination. His spirit presses hard against Aang's, and for a terrible moment in the show's depiction of it, the orange of Ozai's energy seems to be enclosing the white of Aang's, and the wrong outcome seems briefly possible. And then it turns. Not because Aang's power overcomes Ozai's, because Aang's spirit cannot be enclosed. It cannot be absorbed. You cannot take 10,000 years of accumulated human goodness into yourself without becoming something different, and Ozai's spirit is not willing to become something different. It encounters the reality of what Aang carries, and it cannot take it, and it cannot hold its own against it. Aang's spirit covers Ozai's completely. The Phoenix King loses his firebending. He does not lose his life. He does not lose his mind. He loses the one thing he organized his entire identity around having, the capacity for the specific kind of power that defined him. He is still a person. He is still alive. He will spend the rest of his life in a cell without the power that made being himself meaningful to him. The show does not adjudicate whether this is just or sufficient. It simply presents it and moves on. What the show does instead is let Aang be alive on the other side of it. Let him be the person who found the solution that did not require him to become someone else. Let the resolution honor both of the things that seemed in opposition, the Avatar's duty to protect the world and the air nomad monk's commitment to the sanctity of life. Both things survived. Both things are intact in him at the end. This is what the show was always building toward, not a compromise between the two, but a resolution in which neither had to be abandoned. There is a theory about the Avatar cycle itself that extends beyond Aang and beyond Korra and into the long future of the world that the show imagines continuing past its final frame. The theory holds that the Avatar position is not static, that what the Avatar is capable of evolves with each generation as the accumulated archive grows richer and more specific. Early Avatars, working from a much smaller base of accumulated experience, had to figure out most of the role's demands from scratch. Later Avatars have the full benefit of every previous one's errors and discoveries, every previous one's specific encounters with the world's needs and their own limitations. If this is right, then Aang is already more capable, in certain specific ways, than Wan was when Wan held the role. Not more powerful in raw spiritual terms, perhaps, but more equipped. More prepared for the particular texture of the world's problems. And every Avatar who comes after Aang and Korra will inherit not just the earlier archive, but Aang's specific discovery of energy bending, Korra's specific work of reopening the spirit portals and changing the relationship between the physical world and the spirit world permanently. The archive is not just getting longer, it is getting broader. It is accumulating not just more examples of similar situations, but genuinely new categories of experience that no previous Avatar had access to. The Avatar of 10,000 years from now will be, in this reading, the inheritor of an archive so rich and so varied that the role will be something qualitatively different from what it was in Wan's time. Not necessarily easier. The world will have found new ways to need saving by then. New imbalances that no previous avatar encountered, new problems that the archive cannot directly address. But the wisdom available for navigating those problems will be exponentially richer than what was available to Juan, standing alone at the harmonic convergence with only his own short life and his bond with Rava to work from. This is the optimistic reading of the Avatar cycle. Not that the world keeps being saved by the same mechanism, but that the mechanism improves with use, that each generation of Avatar adds something to what the next one has to work with, that the cycle is not just continuity but accumulation, and the thing it is accumulating is the distilled essence of what it means to be human in a world that needs more from its people than ordinary human capacity can easily provide. The finale's final shot is Aang and Katara on the balcony of the Jasmine Dragon Tea Shop in Ba Sing Se, the setting sun painting the sky in warm colors that belong to no single nation, and the camera slowly releases them. For 3 seasons it has been close, inside the caves and the temples and the prisons and the arenas. In the final seconds it steps back. It gives you distance. It says, "This is where I leave them. They will be fine. The story continues for them, in forms we are not going to show you. But they will be fine. The setting sun, the Jasmine Dragon, these details are not incidental. The Jasmine Dragon is named for a real type of Chinese green tea, Jasmine Dragon Pearl Tea, which is scented with jasmine blossoms and hand-rolled into small spheres, and associated with refinement, patience, and the appreciation of subtlety. Iroh named his tea shop after a tea that embodies his own values. And the final shot of the series is set in the place that Iroh built, which is to say it is set inside the material expression of everything Iroh spent his life becoming. The war ended here. The story ends here, in the place that was built by someone who chose, after losing everything, to spend the rest of his life making something warm. There are more theories than this. There are always more. Theories about what happened in the gap between books 2 and 3 that Zuko spent back in the Fire Nation, in the palace he grew up in, next to the father who had burned him and then pretended the burning was justice. Theories about the Order of the White Lotus and how long it had been operating, and what its role was in events the show never depicts. Theories about the nature of the Avatar state itself, whether it is truly a concentration of power or something closer to a temporary merging of spiritual entities, the past lives pressing through the present one. Theories about Sokka's later life, which the legend of Korra references without depicting, confirming only that he died and that his absence left a particular shape in the world. Theories about what happened to Zuko's mother, Ursa, answered partly in the comics and still living in the fan imagination as alternate possibilities. Theories about whether the Foggy Swamp Tribe, with their plant bending and their philosophy of the living world as a single connected organism, represents something that survived from before the separation of the 4 nations. Theories about the Cabbage Merchant, whose persistent appearance in every city Team Avatar visits, has led some fans to suggest, half-jokingly and half-seriously, that he is an Order of the White Lotus operative. The theory is silly. It is also structurally coherent. This is the kind of world that makes structurally coherent, silly theories possible, and that is a feature, not a flaw. The theories persist because the world persists. Because Avatar, The Last Airbender, is a story that does not exhaust itself, that contains more than any single viewing or any single period of life can fully access. The child who watched it in 2005 saw adventure and friendship and the satisfaction of watching the right people win. The teenager who watched it later saw the political architecture and the psychological depths and the way the show was describing something real through fantasy language. The adult who watches it now sees all of that plus the craft, the deliberate construction, the philosophical coherence, the care embedded in every level of the production. The parent who watches it with their own children sees it again from a different angle entirely, through eyes that have lived long enough to understand what Iroh and Gyatso were carrying, and that understanding changes the show without the show having changed at all. The show gives you more as you grow into it, not because it changes, because you do. And the truth underneath all the theories, underneath all the speculation and the close reading and the analysis and the long, careful conversations in comment sections and forums and late-night discussions that begin with someone saying, "Have you ever thought about what really happened to the air nomads?" is this. The show was built with enough care that it rewards attention at every level. The creators put enough in it that there is always something else to find, not because they wanted to be impressive or mysterious, because they believed that the audience deserved the best version of every frame, every sound, every character, every story, and they were not willing to give anything less. The calligraphy is real, the martial arts are accurate, the lunar cycle was tracked across an entire season. Someone chose these things. Someone sat down and said, "This matters." Even if no one notices, even if it never makes it into a review or a theory video or a classroom discussion, it matters because the thing you do not notice is also part of the world, and a world attended to in its unseen parts feels different from a world that is not, even when you cannot say why it feels different. They did it across 61 episodes. In every background scroll, in every hybrid animal, in every carefully tracked moon phase, in every silently sleeping girl with her feet off the ground because her feet are her eyes and she needs to turn off her vision to rest. In every cup of tea and every pie show tile and every piece of text that 100% of the audience cannot read, but that is there, real and accurate and specific, in every single frame it appears. The show cared, deeply and specifically and in ways that most shows, most stories, most things made for human beings to enjoy simply do not have the patience to care. And the result of that caring is a world that you can return to at any age and find something waiting for you that was not there for you the last time, not because someone added it, because you finally grew into the part of yourself that can see it. The theories do not end here because they never end. Someone, right now, is rewatching the first episode and noticing something about the way the ice glows that they never noticed before. Someone is pausing on a shot of Gyatso's room and looking at the arrangement of the bodies again with new understanding. Someone is tracking the camera angles on Zuko's face across an entire season and writing down what they find. Someone is watching the second season for the 12th time and catching the lion turtle scroll in Wan Shitong's library for the very first time and feeling the particular satisfaction of a world that was thinking ahead. The world of Avatar is large enough to hold all of that attention without ever being exhausted by it, and that, in the end, is what all the theories are really pointing toward. Not the specific answer to any specific question, not the resolution of any particular ambiguity, but the fact of a world made with enough love and enough care and enough trust in its audience that it is still worth asking questions about all these years later. Still worth sitting with in the dark, with a blanket pulled close, at whatever hour it is in whatever part of the world you are in right now. The balance holds. The cycle continues. Somewhere in the spirit world, someone is serving tea, and somewhere at the bottom of the ocean, in the memory of the world, the ice still glows blue. One more thing before silence, because there is a theory that does not fit cleanly into any of the numbered sections but belongs to this video as much as any of the others, and it is the simplest one. It is also the one that, if you let it land fully, changes not just how you see the show, but how you think about attention itself. The theory is this: the hidden things in Avatar are not hidden because the creators ran out of time to show them or decided they were not important enough to foreground. They are hidden because the creators understood something about the relationship between visible care and invisible care that most storytellers never quite grasp. They understood that what an audience feels in the presence of a well-made world is not the sum of all the things they consciously notice. It is the accumulated weight of all the things that are true, whether noticed or not. The calligraphy you cannot read makes the world feel older. The martial art you cannot name makes the fighting feel real. The lunar cycle you did not track makes the siege of the North Pole feel inevitable. The sleeping girl with her feet off the ground makes the world feel like it was thought about, all the way down, in every corner. None of these details, taken individually, would change anyone's experience of the show in any measurable way. You could remove any one of them and most viewers would never know anything was missing. But taken together, accumulated across 61 episodes, absorbed through the eyes and the ears and the part of the brain that processes pattern without articulating it, they create something that no single detail could create on its own. They create the feeling of a world that deserves to be taken seriously. That was made by people who took it seriously. That asks you, in return, to take it seriously too. And the beautiful and somewhat astonishing fact about Avatar is that it delivered on that ask. The audience took it seriously. The children who watched it in 2005 grew up and watched it again as teenagers and found new layers. Those teenagers rewatched it as adults and found still more. The adults brought their children to it. The franchise kept finding new audiences across 2 decades because the world was built to last, built with enough genuine depth that it does not run out of things to give you, regardless of how many times you return to it. This is what the theories ultimately point toward. Not questions without answers, but a world that contains enough to keep generating questions worth asking. A world made by people who believed that the details matter, that the things you do not see are just as important as the things you do, that a story worth telling is worth telling, all the way down into the parts nobody asked about and nobody will specifically notice, and that will nevertheless change everything about how the story feels. The ice glows blue. It has been glowing for 100 years. Someone made that choice. Someone said, this light should be active, not residual. This glow should mean something is still burning in there. Someone thought about what it would mean for a spirit to maintain a body through a century of ice and built that meaning into the color of the light and trusted that even if no viewer ever consciously noticed the distinction would be felt. That is the show, not any one theory, not any single hidden fact. The accumulated weight of someone caring about the color of a light in an iceberg in the first episode and the color of a fire in the final battle, and every color and every sound and every camera angle and every sleeping position of every blind girl in every camping scene in between. Someone cared about all of it, every single piece of it. And that caring is what you feel when you watch this show at any age and find yourself unable to quite let it go. You are feeling the caring. You are responding to the presence of attention, paid in thousands of small moments across a story that deserved every one of them. That is the hidden fact that contains all the others, the one that explains everything. The world was loved into existence, and love like that, thorough and specific and patient, and willing to care about the color of light in an iceberg that most viewers will never consciously analyze, is its own kind of permanence. It does not fade. It does not run out. It is simply there, in every frame, doing its quiet work, holding the world together from the inside. Rest well. The light is still on. If this helped you slow down tonight, if the world of Avatar carried you somewhere quieter and more settled, drop a like. And if you want more of this, the subscribe button takes about 2 seconds, and it means more of this finds its way to you without you having to go looking for it. Drop a comment and tell me which theory sat with you the longest. The one that changed something about how you see the show or how you think about the world outside of it. I read every one. Rest well.